Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary Geithner, thank you for coming today. I want to try to make 3 or 4 points during my 6 minutes, so I'll try to talk fast. First, could we put the chart up on the deficits? I want to return to one of the issues that Senator Gregg raised with you, and that is just the question of where we're headed with our deficits in the country. And with the chart that we have up there, I want to focus on the blue line first. The blue line is, as I understand it, what CBO's assessment is of the baseline. In other words, what would happen with our deficits if we simply follow current law and do not do anything different for the next 5 years or so. And what that line shows is that if we just followed the current law, our deficits by 2012 would be down in the 200 billion range and declining over time. And it shows with regard to the President's budget that although there are some spikes, and I understand those spikes as a result of the, I assume, the Stimulus Act and some of the other things that we've been doing, that it also declines rapidly, basically as a result of, I understand, the way that we will be phasing out the excessive spending and the stimulative actions and the TARP funding and so forth that we are engaged with right now. My point is not to show, at first at least, to make the comparison between the two lines, but to make this point. When the President says he wants to reduce the deficit by half by 2012, isn't he basically saying that, I mean, that's going to happen anyway as a result of current law? That's not correct?
Well, Senator, this is very important to point out. That blue line,
yes,
for that to happen, you would have to have no extension of the AMT. You would have to have taxes on 95% of Americans would rise substantially. There would have to be, I think, no foreign wars. It would be the peace and prosperity across the world tomorrow. And so it's not actually anything like a realistic expectation about what is a sensible economic path for the country.
I understand that, and living out the potential for another war, I'm one of those who, I'm sure you know, doesn't believe we should let the tax cuts expire and that we should maintain our current tax policy. And my understanding is that if we did maintain tax policy and didn't have tax increases on the American public, is that line would be somewhere between these two lines. But my point still is, shouldn't we, and again, I'm not trying to make the comparison between the two lines. Others can make that point. I think it's maybe a valid point to argue about. But my point is this. As we talk about trying to reduce the deficit, admitting that we need to do something on tax policy, and we may disagree on that, we do agree on the AMT, shouldn't we try to do much more than simply allow our current trends to take us back to a much smaller deficit? In other words, shouldn't we be much more aggressive on deficit reduction than simply allowing the trend lines to bring us back to a normal reduction in about half of what we have?
Right. I want to just underscore this, that it is absolutely imperative that we lay out a path that brings us back to sustainability. And that requires more than just letting the temporary increases in spending in the Recovery Act expire and fall through. It requires more action by the government and the Congress to do that. And the President's budget proposes a number of specific measures necessary to bring that deficit down to 3% of GDP over time. It's not enough just to sit back and let those temporary things expire. You have to do more things. But the very important record is the tax increases that are proposed in this budget, again, only come when recovery is in place, and they only go into effect on a small fraction of the most affluent Americans, very limited number of small businesses, and only restore those rates, again, to a level that prevailed during a period where you had remarkably strong productivity.
You just got to my second point that I wanted to make, and that is, you say that the tax increases will only happen when the economy has recovered. And I understand that a lot of economists are saying we're going to be recovered by 2011. Frankly, I think there are economists who are saying that maybe our recovery will not be so strong by then. My question to you is, are these tax increases contingent on a recovery, or are they going to happen regardless of what happens in 2011?
Senator, I think it's a very important question. I think that, again, we need to lay out an ambitious path for bringing those deficits down, commit to achieving that, with a mix of measures on the resource side and the spending side that do the best possible job of leaving our economy stronger, and that's what the President's budget tries to do. Now, of course, we're going to have to watch how the economy evolves, and I want to underscore that one of the mistakes governments have made over time in dealing with economic crises is putting the brakes on too quickly. or in ways that, hurt growth just as it's starting to take hold.
So are you
we'd want to
saying
be
that-
careful not to do that.
So are you saying that if we don't see the more rosy picture in 2011, that we may not see the administration suggest that we
No, I'm
proceed with
just
tax
saying that,
increases?
I'm just saying that recovery requires that we keep stimulus sustained until growth is in place, but we have to do it in a fiscally
But
responsible way.
what about the tax policy? Are you including tax policy in that?
Well, again, I would say generally, of course, we got to keep watching things as they develop, but what we need to do together is lay out a path that brings those deficits down, and we have to agree on what the right mix of measures on the resource side and the expenditure side to do that. Now, we're going to have slightly different priorities in that context, but I believe that this is the best package of policies to leave our economy stronger in the future. And I think, again, if you look at the record, just going back to the second half of the 90s, there's a pretty strong empirical, very strong empirical case that that produced a level of private investment and productivity growth that is the envy of the world.
Well, I ran out of time and only got to 2 points, so
I apologize, Senator.